Okay, in the last video we explained that we're going to reduce this to practice, and we explained why we're going to reduce it to practice and why we need to reduce it specifically mathematically. And now we're going to talk about how we're going to do it. And this is the fun part. This is where the games start. This is where we start playing games. Now, as much as I'd like to, I'm not going to stand up here and pretend like I'm smart enough to do this. Okay. Like I could figure this out and go out and do this. Okay. I cheated. I couldn't do it in the forward direction, but I can do it in the backward direction. So in other words, before I started doing any of this, I already knew the right answers because it was like cheating. I'm not engineering this. I'm reverse engineering this. Every time I got stuck on a problem, all I had to do was ask life. I knew that this dude had already figured all this stuff out. Okay. The question is, what's the logical way to do it? What's the best way to do it? Well, we already know that the answer to that is however life did it, that's the best way to do it. That's what life is doing. It's optimizing this code. It's using pure logic to optimize spatial information. So, I'm going to explain to you how it's done, but I don't want you to get confused into thinking that I figured this out, because I didn't. I cheated. I did it in reverse. So anyway, what we're talking about is a code. If this is your coding object that you need to instantiate it. Okay. So what that means is you have a set of variables. Okay. There need to be values that can go into those variables. So when you put those values in there, you create this piece of information by instantiating the variables. Okay, so the first thing you got to do is have variables, and then you've got to have values that you can put into them. So in the case of this kind of codon, we're not going to do letters. We're going to stick with colors for a while here. So this codon would be green, yellow, yellow. Now if we turn it over, it's still green, yellow, yellow. But if we were to do it this way, then it'd be yellow, green, green. But if we turn it over, it'll be green, green, yellow. Okay. The reality is these two codons are the same, okay? But if you're going to do it this way, then you need to start, asking and answering simple questions. How many values are there that we can use to instantiate this variable? Okay, well, they're saying that it's 4, but then they're telling us it's 6. So, if we do it with 4, then we end up with 64 ways to do it, okay? And then how many are over here? And they say 20, but we know that's false too. I mean, in this case, there's 4 variables in DNA, or 4 values in DNA, but then there's a 5th value in mRNA, and then there's a 6th value in tRNA. Well, without knowing anything else besides that, we know that there's now, 216? What's 6 times 6 times 6? 216 possible instantiations of this variable. Okay, so don't be telling me this bullshit that there's 64 codons and that there's 4 nucleotides. There's 6 nucleotides and there's 216. But the reality is we don't know how many nucleotides are. There's an infinite number of nucleotides. There's an infinite number of possible instantiations. There's an infinite number of possible amino acids. See, that's what the code is doing. It's selecting. It's taking infinity and selecting things out of it. Saying, nope, 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 not going to do it. It's ending up with the things that work. It's testing them. That's what natural selection does. So if you want to understand how to implement this code, you have to start asking simple questions about the set of all possible things. Well, what we're talking about doing is breaking symmetry. So we're trying to break the symmetry of these codons. Well, once we start, I wanted to make 64 of these. Okay, so once we start instantiating them, these instantiations create information. So for instance, that's a codon, okay? And so is that. These are two different codons right here. But now what we have to do is start asking about the probability that it's a codon. Okay. This codon, if all we have is green values, the probability of this codon is 100%. This doesn't represent any information. If we have green and blue values, then these represent different, these two codons represent different amounts of information. It's different entropy. So what we're doing is, you know, if we have, as the number of possible values changes, then the probabilities of something being an actual codon changes with it. Well, that's the kind of information that life wants to use, okay? So, like for instance, if we just have 4 colors, then logically speaking, this one codon has the same probability as these 6 codons because they take up the same amount of space on the map. So that means this one's as 6 times more likely than this one, okay? But then you start looking at this one, and you say, yeah, but what really is the difference between these two codons? These are 2 different codons now, but if we start flipping them around, they become the same codon. So this is the way that life generates information within the code. Okay? The molecules themselves are reflecting that information. They're actually representing it. They stand for that amount of information. Okay, so now the question is, okay, if we've got all these different things that we're calling codons, how do we arrange them so that we can generate objective information out of it? Well, the answer is we can't. So when we take this graph and we instantiate all 64 codons as a convenience, okay, we're not creating any objective information in that process. So we can't derive any conclusions from that process. Okay, so we can say red, 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 but that doesn't mean anything. We want to know the probability of red, red, red. So we have to start asking questions about the probability of there being 4 colors, because that's going to derive, we're going to derive from that the information. So we need to start thinking in terms of information symmetry. What we're trying to do is fill in this graph paper, which is objective and logical, so that the information that we obtain out of it is consistent with the information the code is using. So if we do that, I mean, we could start to ask simple questions. I mean, what are we actually encoding? Well, you know, are we encoding points? Are we encoding planes? Are we encoding lines? The answer is all of the above. Okay. So then the next question is, what are the essential ingredients? Well, we already knew from the previous video that we need at least 2 from one and 2 from the other. They all have to be distinctive entities. So we need a minimum of 4 values. So in this case, we've just done it by saying green, red, yellow, blue, okay? That's what this is, green, red, yellow, blue. We take the minimum amount of required information, we break the maximum amount of symmetry. Well, this can get really complex really fast. So we got to keep straight in our mind what specifically we're trying to do. Well, if we're gonna use that as the least number of values that are required to generate the required amount of, then this is the way that we need to instantiate the code, okay? We're going to have 4 values, which means we have a minimum of 3 of each. Well, this is not subjective. This is not arbitrary. There is a way to do this, but there's actually 4 ways to do this. And I've got, these things keep rolling around. So I put them in this tray. These are all 4. And it's really hard to see the difference between them. So let's just say that that one's a these are equivalent, but they're mirrors. Okay, these two are equivalent, but they're mirrors because they go green, red, yellow, blue. But this one goes green, red, blue, yellow, and then this one here. They're almost identical. There's just a slight shift. So there's 4 ways to do it. 2 of them are mirrors, and then the other 2 are just slight shifts on those 2 mirrors. So seemingly trivial. The question is, A, how many of those ways do we need, and B, which one's correct? Well, I'll just flip all the cards and say we need both of the mirrors. Okay, I don't know about the shifting thing. I haven't, it takes too long to try and figure that out. I haven't tried to figure it out. But what we got to have is we got to have the full symmetry of this object maintained. Okay. And our goal is to break it down. Well, there's 2 ways to break this down. Like this, and they're both in this, and they're mirrors. Okay, so we need both of those ways. So when we do that, when we break this symmetry down, we end up with this, which has both. So the reason we need to do that is because a codon is related to an anticodon. Each subsequent iteration is a mirror. So it just goes from one mirror to the next. So in order to see, I mean, in the double helix, both of them are there. The sense strand is a spatial mirror of the nonsense strand, or the, the coding strand, whatever they're calling it now, I don't know. It's all nonsense if you ask me. So once we start trying to figure out how this this code works, how we're breaking symmetry out of it, we reach hard limits in terms of mathematics. So one of the hard limits is we need 4 symbols. Now that doesn't mean that we have to use 4 symbols. That's where they made the mistake. So if you take this graph, you could put infinite symbols in it. You can create infinite instantiations of codons. Okay, any molecule for any reason at any time can be a part of this code, and so that's what life is doing. It's putting different molecules in, testing them, rejecting them. It's learning which ones work. It's actually creating options as it learns this. So these nucleotides, they weren't there. The code created them. Okay, they're used now, and they're used universally because they're such an awesome option. So what we need to do is we need to imagine that we need one of these balls for the sense strand, and we need a second ball for the nonsense strand. And those 2 balls have to be mirrors. We could put 12 different nucleotides in the sense strand. We don't have to use any of those nucleotides to make the nonsense strand. So now we got 24 nucleotides in the double helix. Well, one strand is a mirror of the other strand, okay? This machine breaking that symmetry in that way mathematically demonstrates. So in other words, this is the codon table, but the logic of the codon table created the double helix. So the molecules in the double helix don't create the codon table. The codon table creates the molecules in the double helix. This is a mathematical demonstration of the double helix. This is these are two codons in space mirrored. Okay, it's also a mathematical demonstration of the codon table. Well, now we know that mathematically the codon table and the double helix are the same thing. Well, who the hell knew that? I mean, I know these guys didn't. They never even thought about it. Okay, but now we know it. It's not a theory. We just proved it mathematically. It's a mathematical fact. So these are the kinds of pieces of information that life is using to actually generate this code. So now what we've got is we've got an idea that a codon is a variable. Well, in the double helix, that's terrible. Okay, CCC is an instantiation of the codon. But then it goes to mRNA, and then it goes to tRNA, and then it goes to amino acid, and it goes on and on and on. But see, the same codon, so when it's CCC in the double helix, it's GGG here. Okay, these aren't two different codons. These are two different instantiations of the same codon. So this codon, and then it might be ICC here, and then it's proline here. Okay, CCC doesn't define the codon. Okay, the codon defines CCC. It's an instantiation. The same codon is CCC, and then it's GGG, and then it's ICC, and then it's proline. This is how codes work. Okay, these codons are making these molecules. So now we got to ask ourselves, how many codons are there? Well, we already know the answer. There's 20. So this one might be codon 1, and then there might be codon 12, and there might be, What we need to do is we need to start naming these variables. So we need to, first of all, ask, how many variables need names? Okay, well, we know now that we need 12 nucleotides as variables. We need 20 codons as variables, and we need, at a minimum, 20 amino acids as variables. So these are the ideal numbers of variables. The actual numbers of variables are infinite. It's chaos. We're going to learn how to order chaos. That's what the code is doing. It's making highly improbable molecular events become highly probable. Okay. So there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different ways mathematically that we can do this. I find that using the planes is helpful. So there's 6 planes in a dodecahedron, and we can use the 4 symbols to color the planes. So now we could see that there's a blue-green plane, and there's a blue-yellow plane, and there's a blue-red plane. Okay, so each color has a binary association with the plane. Well, these planes are incredibly powerful tools for generating these logical spatial relationships. So we should know them, and we should respect them, and we should use them. Well, then, there's 6 planes on the dodecahedron, and we've used the 4 faces of a tetrahedron to name them in binary fashion. And then there's 10 planes in the icosahedron, and there's uses for that too. Well, these 10 planes represent a set of 20 codons. Well, there's in the double helix, there's one strand of codons and there's another strand of anticodons. Well, you technically need 2 tables, and then you would need another table to do mRNA. You would need another table to do tRNA. But because the whole code is so symmetrical, we can use the same table to do the double strand, the mRNA, the tRNA, and the amino acids. This is a highly compressed information format. It's designed for compression. It's optimized. It's designed. It's built out of symmetry, so it's a highly symmetrical set of information. It's a logical information network. Okay. So when we do this, well, the very first thing we want to do anytime we have a code is to name the variables. Well, they never did this. They just took the values and used them to name the variables. That's just stupid. No code in the world works like that. So our code shouldn't work like that. So what I did was I asked life how it did it, and it told me. And so I did it that way. So what you got to do is you need two placeholders. You need 4 symbols on one placeholder, and you need 5 symbols on the other. And then you need 2 sets of symbols. So you need one set of symbols for the nucleotides, and you need another set of symbols for the codons, which will then become these amino acids. So what I did was I said, this language already exists. We can use a deck of playing cards. So we can use the suits on the deck of playing cards to name our variables. So I did it in a way. What I wanted to do was we're going to have to name 32 points on a sphere. 12 of them are nucleotides and 20 of them are codons. So I said, let's do it the way life did it. Life took a dodecahedron and broke it down to a cube. Let's use these playing cards and do the same thing. So the nucleotides are easy. There's 12 of them. So let's just start with hearts. It's a symmetrical cyclic relationship. And the middle one is the strongest. So the queen is supreme, just like in my house. Okay, the king doesn't do shit, and the jacks, they're just little kids. Anyway, so we'll just say symmetrically that the queen is the strong one, and the king, and it will go clockwise, queen, king, king, or queen, king, jack. Now we'll say that we'll rank the suits: spades, hearts, clubs, diamonds. Okay, and so the black ones pair with the red ones. So the queen of hearts will pair with the queen of spades across that plane, the plane that we just named with 4 units. So now we could say queen, king, jack. Okay. And we do the same with clubs and diamonds. So now we've created a network of variables that we can name symmetrically with these playing cards. And the suits and the colors and the numbers, they all mean something. Okay. Now we have to go and name the 20 points of the dodecahedron. And we'll just create an algorithm for doing that. We'll say that if there's 3 of the same, it's the ace. Okay, so there's 4 aces and they form a tetrahedron. If there's none of the same, it forms the 5. There's 4 fives and they form a tetrahedron. Now we've got our cube. Okay. I think we've got our cube. Okay, so 4 of the points are aces and 4 of the points are 5s. Okay, now we need to have names for the faces of the cube, and we'll just use the 2, 3, and 4. So if it's a queen king, it's a 2. And we're going to put it in the codon that doesn't, we're going to put it in the off codon. So if it's a queen king, it's a 2. If it's a queen jack, it's a 3. If it's a king jack, it's a 4. So now we do that for all 4 of these suits, and we create the planes of a cube. So now we have a 2's plane that's opposite a 2's plane. We have a 3's plane that's opposite a 3's plane. We have a 4 plane. Okay, so what we've done is we've not only just named our variables, we've named them in a logical way. Okay, these names have logical meaning. We're not naming molecules with, nonsense names like adenine or, phenylalanine. I mean, what the hell does that mean? We're naming the parts of the code, and what it does is it creates a map that has a geography. So there's areas of the code that mean something. But not only that, now that we've named all these things, these codons have variable entropy. So an ace has less entropy than a 5. Okay, the odds of creating an ace are higher than creating a 5. So